Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Saving the World Together with Luke Macmichael and Martin Rezny. Today, our special guest is Jack Rasmussen, the winner of the Golden Door Award for nonfiction book category. He wrote a book, The Yin-Yang, the Elusive Symbol That Explains the World. We're so excited to have him here with us today. Jack, would you like to just give us a quick overview of your background and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hi, Luke and Martin. Thanks so much for having me on today. I am an author. I have two nonfiction books out, Yin Yang, like you said, and then my first one called Fine Dining. And I'm a graduate from the University of Southern California. So I was born and raised in California, grew up in a small town called Los Gatos in Northern California, which is about an hour south of San Francisco. And then I traveled down the coast to go to the University of Southern California, where I studied business administration, cinematic arts, and journalism. And I graduated there in the spring of 2022. So it's been 2 years now, just had my 2 year graduation anniversary. And then I traveled to Taiwan to teach English for a year. And I was located on an archipelago off the coast of Taiwan. And that's where I wrote Yin Yang. So I actually wrote it while I was in Asia, which is where the symbol originated. And yeah, now I'm back here and I'm writing my third nonfiction book to finish up the trilogy in my mind and doing other things as well in entertainment.
Excellent. What's the third book about? It's related. So you had the food, fine dining, yin yang. What's the third part of the trilogy?
The third is going to be sort of interlinked, but surrounding mentorship and coaching and how someone can change your life. That's sort of the vague overview.
That's
I don't
awesome.
want to go into too much detail, but yeah.
Yeah, no, we're super excited to hear. And it sounds like you're on the right path, Jack, and it's great. Like I wish I was so inclined to write books at your age and kind of get into it. We've been just writing our own book, Pillars of Protopia. I wrote my first one about 5 years ago, The Pillars of Utopia, and we've changed that word from utopia to protopia because utopia is a loaded word. You'll never get there, but it's all about progressing towards it. Joy is in the journey. So it's a lot of fun though, but you're 20 years ahead of me. So I'm expecting great things from you as far as saving the world and where it goes and how these
No
books can
pressure.
be a big no pressure.
What's, wait, I have a question. What's the difference between a utopia and a protopia?
Yeah, so utopia is kind of this idea of the perfect world, whatever it is in your own head. But it's loaded because a lot of people's utopia is another person's dystopia, and it's never perfect for everybody, right? So you might have overlords and slaves and all these caste systems. So there's no really perfect place for everybody all the time, unless you have, I guess, your own experience machine holodeck where everybody has their own version. But put that aside. Utopia is just a complicated concept, and a lot of people have negative connotations with it because of these dystopian views of what one person's utopia might be. So protopia is a much more open concept where it just means you're progressing towards whatever your version of utopia means. You're constantly making things better, and it's more of a concept of bringing the world together in any way possible, helping unite people in any way possible, and helping people find their purpose in any way possible to make the world slightly better than it was yesterday. It's like a 1% progression kind of thing.
Yeah, the one small step at a time approach, which also is connected to the other problem of utopia, which is it's usually seen as unattainable, because that's like every time you have like a big goal in the future, then it always seems unattainable, and so it sort of demotivates people from even trying to do anything. Whereas if you focus on the one next immediate small step, that's an improvement, that's incredibly attainable. And then if you just keep doing that over time, then, in a while you notice that like, yeah, things have gotten better. It just it would have felt unattainable if we just were looking at the end goal as opposed to the next step.
And with that being said, I'm currently living in my own version of protopia, as we all are kind of building our ideas and building our books. And it's just a constant state of making a better protopia for everybody and bringing other people into their version of protopia. So I love it as a better word. I think everybody should be kind of moving towards words like that are more inclusive of various ideas and other people's ideas of a better world or a paradise world or whatever it might be. So I like that. What about you, Jack? What's your version of protopia or your version of a paradise in your own mind?
Yeah, well, first, I love that concept because it allows us to not be complacent, and it allows us to not define a moment as perfect or a certain, once you get the award or once you get the dream job, you're not done. You still have a journey ahead of you. So I like how protopia, it's sort of like you're always moving. There's never an end point.
Yeah.
And, it's not one thing makes you fulfilled. It's a constant cycle. And that's kind of why I wrote about yin yang, is because it's always moving. It's always dynamic. And I think sometimes we really want one specific thing in life, and we're just have tunnel vision to get that one thing, and then we get it, and then it's like, all right, now my life's so like, what am I doing now?
It's a midlife crisis concept.
Yeah, exactly.
You hit a dull void. I've been through a midlife, and I'm getting closer and closer towards late midlife or post life crisis or whatever. But we all go through these different ups and downs, challenges, whether it's in relationships or in jobs or careers. But I really loved your book as far as living in the moment, trying to just enjoy the moment for what it is, not worry so much about the past or the future necessarily, but just meditate on the good things we have now and what we want to build towards. So I love that as a concept for saving the world together. If everyone in the world could kind of just have more of this, live in the moment, build the future together kind of ideals, I think that would solve a lot of our problems.
Oh, 100%. Actually just watched a short film called Blind Baisha, which is a foreign film, and it speaks about a lot of the themes in my book, which is, if you live in the past or in the future, there's no way to be happy because you're living in right now. But if you're so focused on the past and it paralyzes you because you're dwelling on the past, or you're so attuned to the future, only thinking about the future, you can't enjoy the moment now. And the main character in the film, she can only see the past and the future out of her eyes. She can't see the present. So she's obviously depressed, and she can't do anything. She can't find a husband because she only sees him as a child and as an old man. So I just thought that parallels my book, because the whole purpose of meditating and of doing nothing, non-action, really just sitting there, is to enjoy the moment, be grateful for what you already have. There's nothing you need more. You already have it. And a lot of people I know get very uneasy about just sitting there and doing nothing.
Yeah.
But I think that's the trick, really, to be happy with, where you're at and who you are, just who you are. You don't have to be doing anything to be worthy. You're just worthy based on just because you're alive. You don't need work to define you or an award or anything. So that's important.
Oh, I love that. Martin, what do you think? What's your opinion on all that?
Well, but with that kind of mindset, you would never make America great again, for example, because you wouldn't be focusing on the past and the future to the detriment of the present.
I don't know if we want to get into politics or not.
No, I'm sorry for like making it even remotely political. It's just like, I just thought of it immediately, how it's not just an American thing, obviously. It's just like this whole, like, either nostalgia, like people who are like really just, those were the days, when I was, younger and everything was great, because I was a child and I had no responsibilities, but, never mind that. Or just for utopians, like you looking into the future, and sort of like the extreme version of that is this sort of effective altruism, people who are like optimizing like how the well-being of like 1 trillion of people in like 10,000 years, and the sort of whoever's suffering now, it sort of doesn't really matter, because you're looking into the like ultimate, future. So maybe if I were to ask you a question, actually, how do you think that because I wrote a book about astrology, actually, and also very interested in sort of, let's say, vaguely Eastern philosophical concepts and ideas, including yin and yang, but I haven't, studied that myself into in a lot of detail. So maybe my question would be, if you take yin and yang as a concept, do you think it has something to say about the future? Ask a philosophical question.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it does, because one side of the symbol informs the other. So the future will always be the other side of the symbol. And I know that's kind of vague, but basically, if you're very yin, which is dark, it's feminine, it's hidden. So if you're going through a period where you're hiding, you don't want to go outside, you're paranoid maybe, it's inevitable for you to, in the future, be the opposite of that. It's kind of like you're hibernating as a bear, and all of a sudden to then go out, go outside, and to finally be able to show yourself. So it kind of, dictates the future.
Very cool.
And then when you're exposed for a long time, or you're training, or you have a season in basketball, or you have a season in football, you then need an off season to rest. So it is a cycle, because you're exposed for a long period of time, then you need to be hidden. And it kind of dictates the future in that way, where you can't always be exposed 24/7. You'd pass out. You'd be so tired.
So it's the cyclical time, right? Because the Western civilization is very big on linear time, that we can for instance, economically grow forever, and we'll just have more and more and more of one thing, and that's just going to be fine. But I think the Eastern philosophies are more aligned with the idea that there are cycles of things, and if you, like you say, if you do one thing, then eventually you have to compensate by doing the other counterpart of the cycle. And also this sort of reminds me of these ideas this too shall pass mantra, which is whatever is bad about the thing that you're in, it's a phase, and it will stop being bad in that way at some point.
Yeah, and you're so right about the linear concept in the Western world, and I think that's why we have so much burnout, because we don't like to stop ever, and it's just make more money, do more things, get more, achieve more all the time. And that's why people get so burned out, and a lot of companies struggle with that, because they don't have a good work-life balance, or any type of balance in general. So you're totally right. And that is one of my favorite quotes, this too shall pass, because people go through hard times and they go through, positive times, but it's important to remember that shouldn't change how you show up. If you win a championship, okay, great, move on to the next one. If you lose or don't make it to the championship, that's okay too. Work for the next one. It shouldn't affect how you move in the world. It's just keep moving, keep that equilibrium, and don't let what happens around you affect you, even if it's good or bad. Don't let it get to you where it kind of changes how you act, or your core should always be the same no matter what happens around you.
Okay, so I want to change gears for a sec, Jack. I hope you don't mind if we talk a little bit about more of the religious aspects of your book. So you mentioned a lot of the East Asian religions in the book, Taoism, Taoism, and Buddhism. And you mentioned yourself as well. You're raised a Christian, and you're non-denominational Christian still, I believe, in your book. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was actually baptized Catholic as a kid, and then I got rebaptized in 2021 as just a Christian, non-denominational. Yeah.
So how does that tie with the other religions you've studied? Do you think they're all compatible, or is it one better than the other in your mind? What do you think? What's your opinion on that? without putting thought too much.
No, yeah. I don't think one is definitely not better than the other. I don't think any religion's better than the other. I think being spiritual is very important to staying balanced. And why I connected all these religions in one book is because there is a theme in all the scripture of each religion about balance and about centering yourself and inner reflection, inner exploration, and going into your thought process. So I found that commonality. So I wanted to tie them all together under the veil of the yin yang symbol, because the word balance shows up in the Bible. The word balance, shows up in these other texts as well. And that was kind of the central theme I was going for, is we all have this balance inside of us. We all have this yin yang symbol inside of us. And if we recognize that and choose to balance it or utilize that within us and then see it around us, we can become more balanced ourselves, but we can also connect with the people and things around us, I think, deeper.
Do you see like big problems in the world today with the conflict between religions, whether it's causes war or politics or whatever it might be? Do you think that's a big issue, and does your book kind of help solve that in some way?
I do think that is a big issue. I think people are very righteous and think that their religion's the only way. And yeah, that's a huge issue. And I do think my book serves to unite different people who practice different religions, because at the end of the day, we're all looking for salvation. We're all looking for, some type of enlightenment. And it's just our gods are different, or the light that we're looking to is different, but that doesn't make us different or right or wrong. It just makes us different types of believers, but we're all believers and we're all looking for the same things. So I think it serves to unite different religions, definitely.
That's great. I love that. I'm born and raised Mormon, by the way. It's a very, very kind of hardcore Christian most of my life. But I've definitely gone through various periods of like, maybe there's some truth to all these other ones. For the longest time, I always believed our church is the only true church. All the other churches have just part of the truth, and they have good things, but we're the only true church. But now I'm definitely more open-minded to just like all religion can be great as long as we're not fighting each other and judging each other or killing each other over petty squabbles. Those are the bad parts of religion, I guess you could say, that we have to kind of somehow cure ourselves of or somehow avoid as we move forward into this future world together. And I think that's definitely one of the core things we need to focus on. It's our peace pillar. Our very first pillar is focused on trying to unite the world in peace and harmony in some ways, and avoid all these conflicts, and whether it's political or religious based, to just find a way past them, find a way to talk it out together and understand that we all come from different backgrounds. So I love how your book can kind of push that and just show a better way to kind of do religion and to do spirituality without being too high and mighty and too my way or the highway kind of mentality. So I love that. Thanks. Martin, what do you think? Any opinions on that?
Well, I was just thinking now that like I'm technically baptized as a Czechoslovakian Hussite, which is one group that I imagine you don't hear very often about. It's a Czech church, and the funny thing is, in the context of religious conflict, it's actually a church that was like a protest church, like Lutherans before Luther. Jan Hus was the sort of prophet kind of person that started this, and was also against indulgences. And the big thing about Hussites was that they basically were the best army back then, and they repeatedly defeated Pope's armies that were sent to like sort them out, including they were the first pretty much to really use guns in combat in like medieval times. It's like was a lot of knights showing up to a gunfight back then, so it wasn't that surprising in hindsight that the Hussites were winning a lot. So this whole kind of thing, like in the context of like the very very not like the sort of Eastern balance type stuff. It's like the sort of this is the most Western Christian kind of thing. It's actually, I would say, actually very American in some ways. Maybe that's why we like quite like Western movies in the Czech Republic. Still, this sort of like romanticism of like the hero with the gun type stuff is actually very Czech also. So I was actually thinking that personally, though, I actually also gravitate a lot toward this sort of Eastern philosophy, particularly like something like Zen Buddhism, precisely because of this sort of like meditation type stuff, which I find quite helpful myself, and which is like but then even then though you'd notice that like you could use Zen Buddhism historically. It's like somebody like samurai warriors, like you can actually even take this very peaceful philosophy and somehow use it to enhance your war fighting capability, because there's this always this sort of what do you call it, like sort of religious zealot warrior type thing. It's pretty universal thing in all human cultures. So maybe if I want to turn it into some kind of question, do you think that the religion as such, because like particularly atheists are harping on this point a lot, do you think that like religion and spirituality as such has like caused more wars or more peace overall in like the history of mankind?
That's a loaded question.
For sure.
I think, I mean, I think it's definitely helped society more than hurt. But I think because over time we've developed so many world religions that it has caused disagreement, right? But I think that's inevitable when you are creating anything that's life altering, that, humans, that changes the life of humans. It will always have drawbacks. So I don't think it could have been perfect, because there's so many different religions. But I do like how you brought up the samurai warrior, and because I'm into kind of the Asian combat fighting now, and Bruce Lee in particular, for example, or people who use sort of the type. It's kind of a type of body movement, and it's very spiritual and religious, how you can tap into your inner, your vibration and your energy to be a better fighter or samurai. And that's something that is very interesting. And I think it's definitely an Asian thing, where meditation and being centered allows you to be a better fighter, which is interesting, because you're not supposed to be a fighter technically, but to defend yourself. I think it's cool how you brought that up. I also heard you say moderation, or you're speaking on moderation, and I would love to ask both of you about this. Is I know we hear a lot that everything's good in moderation, and I think a lot of religions do talk about that, where we should either restrain ourselves or not go, not eat a bunch of food, or not go too overboard on anything, which I think is it is good in some instances. But I think sometimes in America, we think we don't like to stay in moderation, which I think sometimes helps us. I think that's why we have achieved so much. But I don't know if it's sometimes we need to stay in moderation or sometimes not, depending on the circumstance, or if we should always stay in moderation. And even in my life, I know I like to stay in moderation, but sometimes I don't. And sometimes it's exciting, so I don't know what you think about that.
Well, all I can say is to just go back to your example of the pendulum, where sometimes you're not moderate, sometimes you're extreme, sometimes it's fun to be a little crazy. It's fun to be a little extreme. It's fun to get into heated arguments and heated battles of whatever kind. But I think definitely important not to go too far, because you can definitely lead toward war and death and destruction of various kinds, both internal and external. So I think it's extremely important that we do keep our center, and that when we do let ourselves go out of control one direction, we kind of try to come back and take a step outside of ourselves a little bit and think, oh, was that discussion or fight maybe a little too much? What can I learn from that? How do I kind of avoid going so extreme in the future, because it probably wasn't good for me? I think that's the most important part of moderation, is being able to step aside and decide for yourself whether it was worth it or not, and then kind of learn from that experience, I think.
Well,
what do you think, Martin?
I'd say there's actually a bit of serious like Western critique of Buddhism in this regard, because like some Buddhism also isn't like a unitary thing. There are different kind of Buddhist schools that do things differently. Like particularly Zen is different from like the diamond. Diamantwastika in Czech, it's like a diamond trail, maybe, or something like that. It's like a different way, which is as I understand it, more like performative than Zen Buddhism. But the thing is, in Buddhism, like the big goal, somewhat, is supposed to be like avoiding suffering or getting entangled into like the worldly affairs. Yeah, unnecessary suffering, sure. But like worldly affairs in general, sort of like, build a sanctuary on top of a mountain and then like go there, meditate type thing. Sort of to escape like even the cycle of reincarnation, and like to get to like an enlightened state sort of outside of life. And the thing is, the critique is like it's more of like a, I guess, Nietzschean critique. And the point is that like what the West is great at is like striving to achieve some sort of progress type stuff. And usually when you do that, it does come with like a lot of imbalance and personal suffering, and you're not really optimizing your own quality of how like you feel generally, or how serene you are, or something like that. But like the point is that maybe some problems actually are like in need of being addressed, as opposed to just tolerated and like be left to exist as they are. So it's this sort of whole idea of like progressing toward a better future is more of a striving thing. And that's why I think there are some like, I think particularly Western people who have sort of invented a concept of like something that's sometimes called a fall Buddhist. And like sort of a fall Buddhist is like a kind of a Zen Buddhist who, however, isn't sort of striving to minimize their own personal suffering, but are able to be serene even if they're suffering, while trying to actually accomplish some sort of enlightened goal. So like this is sort of like a fusion of things. So that's sort of where I'm at in regarding this question. I would also say that like I am of the belief, like the yin-yang thing, that like if you really go yin-yang, then you should sort of apply it. Then you realize that even being a perfect, serene, Buddhist, enlightened person is a phase or a part of a cycle of all the necessary things that need doing.
Well, just to give a couple of concrete examples to kind of wrap up that thought, is that things like drunk driving, for example. Some people, they drink too much and then inevitably they drunk. I had a high school teacher that on his retirement party, he drank a whole bunch. And then on his way home from his retirement party, he ended up killing somebody, very unfortunately, and then spent the next 10 years in jail for manslaughter, which was absolutely horrific. But that had a huge effect on me as a teenager. That these kinds of drinking, these kinds of parties are probably not that great. I mean, I know 95% of the world really loves drinking and loves kind of partying it up. But when it leads towards even an occasional instance of somebody losing their life over it, or somebody, driving because they didn't have the wherewithal to say, let's not drive. Well, I'm a little too drunk, and his friends didn't stop him or didn't take away his keys. Those are tragic things that I think almost everybody knows somebody that was in a situation like that, even in our first world, society. And I'm sure it happens much more, with drugs and other kinds of, things like that in third world or other parts. So there's always these extreme scenarios that are definitely too far, that's too far up the pendulum. And in many cases, you can't come back from it. Your life is ruined, or someone else's life is ruined because of it.
Yeah, so suffering would be justified for a higher purpose, not, so just tragic, stupid suffering that's to the detriment of everyone. I guess that's universally a bad idea.
Yeah. So me personally, I typically draw a hard line on things like drugs and alcohol. I've never drank in my life. I've never had drugs in my life. It's just because I feel like I don't need it. And I feel like the world is probably better, if we can all learn to enjoy life and live in the moment without the, the drugs and alcohol induced kind of fun, because it leads towards in many cases, tragic destruction.
Yeah, well, no alcohol. That's the hard line that most Czech people would draw on the other side of that.
It is. I'm definitely unusual, but it's each of us have to kind of figure out what that balance is. And if you see friends going beyond it too, we have to be each other's keepers too. We have to help each other to not do these tragic things that might ruin their lives.
So what do you think, Jack?
Yeah, you mentioned, Jack, you did have a history with with partying and a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you both said. I think it's very hard, as Martin said, to I think it takes a lot of discipline to be completely sober, especially when you are social, because a lot of social events do have at least alcohol, and so I think for me to be completely sober is a challenge, just because I'm put in circumstances where it's presented to me. And that's another hard thing, is in order to be balanced, I think especially young people in today's world need to be able to say no, and need to be able to know when to turn around and not go in a certain direction. Yep. And also, I love what you were touching on between worldly and spiritual. So there's two aspects there, and that can even be thought of as sort of a balance within the yin-yang symbol. Is a lot of worldly things, obviously it's great to achieve and to, progress as a society in the world, but those are all worldly things, and they don't make us happy internally. What makes us happy internally is the spiritual side, the non-worldly things, where, it's great to have a car, it's great to have a house, but how are you feeling internally? Do you have a sense of gratitude? Are you happy with who you are on the inside and how you maneuver in the world? And there is this group of people called the minimalists that I've been following for a while, since even before they became popular. And their whole philosophy was, they were very rich and made a lot of money, and they had beautiful houses and wives, but they weren't happy on the inside at all. They didn't like their lives. And so what they did was, they moved out of the big house, they got a small house, they got rid of all their things, no possessions, a little bit of possessions, but no clutter, and just got rid of everything and sort of started from a blank slate with no possessions. And they felt so much happier without the worldly things that everyone, or at least a lot of people, strive for, like a huge house and many cars. They got rid of all that and just focused on being a human being and being around each other, and everything changed for them. They became so much happier. So that's just one example of, I think, that balance is, we want to achieve things in the world, but are we internally where we're supposed to be? And can those even be compatible? Or do we have to say goodbye to the worldly things in order to be better spiritually and be better internally and show up better for the people around us? I think you can have both, but I think you need to be able to not focus so much on the worldly things, which can be hard for lots.
Well, actually, I think
sorry, it's definitely an extremely important personal question that I think we should all think about. I think everyone in the world needs to ask themselves this question, as often as possible. Am I on the right path for what I want my life to be? And help others kind of along that path too. That we're not in a silo. None of us is individualistic enough that we can find our happiness alone, really. We can be with our friends, our family, people online even. And we're all in this spaceship Earth together. Whatever successes we have, we can share them with others, and we can share the lessons with others. So I really love how your book kind of pushes that question. Even in my head, it pushes pushes us to find that balance for each of us. I like it. Martin.
Just wanted to sort of remember an example of like this sort of balancing of things that we talked about, particularly with like young people and alcohol. Actually, it's one of the sort of, I think, paradoxes that if you have like at least that sort of a point of view that's shared by many people in my country, which is very alcohol friendly, but at the same time, we're sort of, handling it pretty well. And usually when somebody's being drunk and like belligerent in Czech Republic, it's foreign tourists from countries who are not accustomed to like sort of reasonable social alcohol culture. Like oftentimes it would be people who just go party to Europe because they come from like some more like very prohibition like places, like maybe like United States sometimes, or particularly like for some reason like tourists from United Kingdom usually tend to be very extreme. Also, it's usually English speaking countries for some reason, and so when they come to Czech Republic, they sort of suddenly have like access to like our levels of like cheap alcohol, which is usually pretty good in quality, and so they just let's say balance is not what they achieve in that situation. And so maybe like in particular with like the alcohol, like sometimes if you are more balanced in how you're dealing with the thing as such, as opposed to more extreme on either end, then maybe then you can live more in like some sort of balance with it, sort of paradoxically, like because if you try really to stamp something down extremely, like oftentimes you're just making the sort of forbidden fruit type thing that sort of pushes it out of balance. But that's just like, I think it's just one example that sort of occurred to me of the balancing.
It's definitely the social connections that are the solution to any of these kind of addiction problems or drug problems. It's just about giving people a better purpose and giving them more friends and more family, more community to engage with. I think there's been several studies. Portugal has the famous one with, I think, just legalizing everything and then just having more focus on taking all the money they used to police it and giving it back to them to help them start businesses or help them get engaged in communities. And it lowered the addiction rate by almost 50%. So there's just lots of great studies out there in the world that are happening more and more that are helping us understand, the human limits of these things.
Or to put it in another way, has the war on something ever worked? Like the approach is like war on drugs or war on like, I don't know, whatever.
The only way to solve any of these problems is to do it together and to really just take a step back and think about real solutions to these problems. And finding our yin and yang balance is a huge part of that, I think.
Actually, I remember one sort of great example when somebody was making fun of this in IT Crowd. I don't know if you've seen that show. It's like a British sitcom. It's pretty famous. So there was like a company with like an IT team, and the boss was kind of crazy, and so he was like declaring war on something constantly. And one of the things, like one day he declared war on stress. And then he told the employees that like everybody who at the end of the day will still be stressed will be fired. Great winnable situation.
All right. So I think we're near the end of our time for today, but Jack, is there any other final questions or thoughts you'd kind of like to touch on before we close on for today?
I really liked your touch on addiction and things like that, because I have a lot of friends or people who've struggled with that. And I think a lot of times it's because, as you said, they do feel alone maybe, and maybe they consume whatever they're consuming alone. And I think that's why church and these communities where we bring people together, as you said, being together allows people to stop doing that because they don't feel as alone. And I think sometimes when we are alone, we do things that we wouldn't normally do. And so, yeah, I do like the community aspect of church and of, religion. And I think that's what helps a lot of people not go down that path. Yeah. So I think that's important. Yeah.
No, it's definitely been great for me. All my life, I've had this, community of friends and family. So even if you don't necessarily believe in 100% of the doctrine, you've got the community and the society to back you up, and it's definitely kept me out of a lot of dark places, I guess you could say, and I'm definitely very grateful for having that in my life. So no, 100%. And anybody who's watching this, if you ever feel need to reach out and you want a friend, I'm here. We're here for you. Saving the World Together is all about connecting people and getting you engaged in a good cause, whatever that might be, and finding that purpose. Please check out Jack's book if you're interested. Yin-yang, the elusive symbol that explains the world. Do you have a copy? You can flash it if you want.
I don't have one on me, but you check out my website.
Yeah, we'll put a link.
.com, yeah. And both my books are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, so can get them there.
Fine dining. And as a last thing as well, I wanted to mention the Through the Golden Door Truth Creators program. Jack also has a free couple of months with his award to do as well, coming up soon. Check out our link if you're interested in any of the Through the Golden Door programs. The Truth Creators program is all about helping people to write books like this, and kind of helping save the world in its own way, helping make the world a little bit better by creating works of truth and works of goodness that can help the world on its path towards a new society, a better society, progressively better society in any way possible. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Martin, you have any final thoughts or questions for Jack before we let him go?
Final thoughts. Actually, I don't think I do, which I could have said faster.
No worries.
I'm just meditating. That's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna ask you about astrology because I'm into
okay.
that, but we'll save that for a next discussion.
Sure. We're looking forward to getting to know you better, Jack, and hopefully we can connect again soon on particularly your third book or any other books or any other initiatives that we can work on together. I'm very excited to make your acquaintance and work with you on saving the world together. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone, today. We'll see you again next time. Let's save the world together.
Thank you.